So let's take a look at what we're trying to build today. Nothing too incredibly complex. Basically, we have a page with some vacation pics. The next button is disabled. You click through the slideshow, and when you're done, the next button becomes enabled. Now, what I see a lot of new programmers in Storyline do is create a variable for each one of these things. Viewed slideshow 1, and it would be a true false variable, and it would start off false. And then they'd have a view slideshow 2, view slideshow 3, and they would work the same. Then a user would click this, and then once they got to the last image, they would adjust the variable saying view slideshow 1 is true. And then they do the same for the other two slideshows. And by the time you're done, at the end of each one, you have all three have viewed slideshow variables equal to true. That's fine. That is one way to do it. But I typically prefer within a slide, if it's a single slide interaction, to reduce the number of variables as much as possible. That way I'm not creating a bunch of variables course wide. The more variables you have, the harder it is to remember what each variable stands for. So on a single page interaction, unless it's really complex, I will try to avoid variables. So I will typically use a variable for anything that needs to be remembered course-wide, such as a score or something that's been completed. Has the user watched the introduction video? Have they not? Have they completed module 1? Have they not? Things like that. Things that need to be remembered when the user returns to the course after exiting, kind of the same thing, but those variables there will allow a user to exit mid-course, come back, and have the course remember what they've done. And then very, very complex interactions that require complex tracking of when things are happening. Like, is a user dragging this thing? Did the user drag this thing, and while dragging, was it dropped here? Like really complex things. So typically it's course-wide tracking. Another disadvantage to using the variables on this interaction would be I would need multiple triggers. So I would need a trigger that says change the state of the next button in my player to normal when a variable changes, and then I would pick slideshow 1, and then I would need the condition when slideshow 1, 2, and 3 are true. Now, if they did them in a different order, well, that means I need 3 triggers. I need this trigger for when variable 1 changes, for when variable 2 changes, and when variable 3 changes. That's no good. That's a lot of extra work. So what I like to do in place of variable is use states. Notice how I have kind of these boxes off of the stage. Each one has a normal and a completed state. So what I can do here then is on my last image of each slideshow, I am changing the state of the China label to completed, which is this guy off the stage. I do the same thing for Turkey. I change the state of the Turkey label to completed. Notice I'm using the same state on each one of them. Same thing for Paris, change the state to completed. Now I only need one trigger that says change the state of the next button when the state of all of those country labels are completed. And this is why I use the same state, because I can check them all for an individual state. Now you may be saying, Nick, why didn't you just use visited? Well, I could have used visited, but visited means if I click on it, then it becomes visited. So let's imagine I actually wanted to leave these on the screen. Now if I had visited, a user could come click this box and it would become visited. So that's why sometimes I will use completed or finished or something like that. If they're off screen, visited would have worked perfectly fine because the user could never click them. But if I wanted to have them on screen, then I need to use a custom state because I don't want visited to trigger if the user accidentally clicks on that box. So let's take a look one more time. Notice the next button is disabled. I'm going to click through these photos, and you have some scorpions on a stick. I thought I would be brave enough to eat those, but I was not. You got a nice Istanbul metro, Turkish flag, Galata Tower. Notice when I close, the state has changed to completed. Now, if I were going to leave these on screen, I would make the text match, which I haven't done. And I'm going to click through the last one, and then you're going to notice the state of this is going to turn green when I get to the last image, and the next button's going to show. Boom. And it worked perfectly. So it's green, the next button is showing, and notice I didn't have to use a single variable to achieve that. So now my course variable structure is way cleaner than if I had added 3 variables. And the problem that I see with newer programmers is they will do the variable method on 20 slides. So imagine 3 variables times 20 slides. I now have 60 variables and I'm worried that I'm going to overwrite them. The other problem with variables is if I come back to this screen, I either need to manually reset my variables to make it work the way that I want, such as setting them all to false when the timeline loads, or I need to do some slide when revisiting manipulation to change what happens when a user revisits the slide. So, use variables sparingly. Try to get away with states. I would say use states every time, unless it's going to be way harder to do this sort of state hack. And it's going to be way easier using variables. But if you can think of doing it with variables, you could probably do it with states. And I would lean that way most of the time, unless your interaction is across multiple slides. Thanks for your time. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.